Let's bow our heads and prepare our hearts and our minds to receive the word of God. Amen. I forgot to announce this during the announcements, but I am having some trouble with the newsletter, so it didn't come out this week. They've done a couple of things at work that have really messed up my church job. They got us new computers, and so we don't have a media reader on our computer anymore. And they have, I always lift pictures from Facebook that Patty takes and put on the newsletter, and they've blocked Facebook at work now. So I'm going to have to, apparently I guess, do my church work at home now, instead of on the school's dime. So that'll take some adjustment, but it's out there. I just been having some technical difficulties, so I didn't figure out what to do with I got to figure out a way to get this stuff on to YouTube. So obviously, as you saw, I'm extremely technologically proficient, and so we have all the confidence. And if I need any help, I'm going to ask Butch.
Or get one of your boys.
That was good. That's good. So newsletter is out there. I'm just having some technical difficulties with it that I will figure out. I have Kyle on speed dial, and so he's helping me. So it'll all work out.
Yeah.
My wife is really into lights right now, and it began when she started watching this show called Parenthood. I don't know if anyone has seen it, but it's one of those shows where there's this family and they go through all these really difficult and serious issues and everything. And I don't like watching it because I figure my own family's gone through enough difficult and serious of issues, and I don't really need to watch another family deal with it during my free time. It's kind of a depressing show, I think, and I don't like to watch depressing shows. I like to watch feel-good shows like the Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island and The Walking Dead. So those are more my speed. But Megan loves this show, and it's about this family called Bravermans, right? Yeah, Bravermans, right? Yeah, and apparently they have a lot of this, the drama, the action takes place in their backyard. And in the backyard of the house, and she loves their backyard, just loves it. And I guess they have all these really cool lights, old-fashioned lights that are everywhere. You can't see here because we have too many lights on. But there's lights. There you go. Ask and we shall receive. There's lights everywhere, and she thinks it's just absolutely amazing. There are those big old-fashioned lights that are strung up everywhere, and she just thinks it looks absolutely amazing. And she wants our house to look exactly like that. And I tell her the main reason we can't do that is because we don't have a television show's budget, and she also doesn't realize just how many. Keith, you know I'm not the most handy man in the world, but I'm assuming that would be a lot of extension cords. That would be a lot of extension cords. And so I keep telling her, I was like, that the extension cords would be everywhere. And she's like, you just don't know what you're doing. And now I can go home and tell her, Keith agreed with me. And so...
Wire under your egg.
No, just be quiet. No, just go with me on this. It's too difficult to do, Keith. But, we just, too many extension cords, and the lights would break all the time. I could just imagine William and Daniel out there with sticks and poles and breaking lights, and I just keep on telling her that it's just not practical. And she really isn't interested in me being practical. She just likes lights, and she thinks the lights are really cool. So, me being the responsive and understanding husband that I am, I've tried. I got these solar lights, and I even built a pergola back there just so I could hang lights from it. And we even have these really cool lights that are solar powered, and they change colors from blue to green to purple, and it all looks pretty. It all looks pretty good. And I have to admit, especially since she's not here, I have to admit that she's right. The backyard looks pretty awesome. The lights are amazing. Like the lights made it, they made it look like it is. It's a huge difference seeing those lights. And our backyard is really transformed. And when you go out there at night now, you really feel like you're in a different place. And it's with all the lights and everything, it's like a place of tranquility, or a place of peace and relaxation. So when I saw that, when I see the transformation, it helps you realize how powerful light is, how beautiful light is, how light can transform a place, like our backyard. How light has the power to drive out darkness. The idea of light is so symbolic. And as we've been talking about the Sermon on the Mount, this idea of light, Jesus brings up. And I think it is a very powerful and symbolic piece to this sermon. And when I think about our backyard, when I think about what a difference the light can make, I think that you can really understand what Jesus was getting at. And in the Sermon on the Mount, he specifically references this idea of light and this idea of salt, too. And so I would like to read from Matthew chapter 5, verse 13 through 16. This is about the salt and the light. And it says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." So, why does Jesus use these two words? Why does he use salt and light to describe who his followers are, to describe what they are to do in this world? And I think that we can start off with the idea that what Jesus meant here is that as disciples, as his followers, we are to give the world flavor. We're to bring out the best taste to those around us. We're to let our light shine by bringing others to the faith. So let's start with the idea of salt. I did a lot of research about salt for this sermon, so if you woke up this morning and said, "Man, I wish I knew some more facts about salt," today's your lucky day. Before the days of refrigeration, of course, salt was used to preserve meat. And salt was so valuable that in the Roman Empire, they actually used it as currency to pay their soldiers. And today we use salt to keep our roads passable and clear in the winter. And salt can be used as a household cleaner. You get wine stains out with it. You can polish brass with salt. You can use salt to deodorize things like shoes or things like that. You could clean a fish tank with it. You can keep your windshield frost-free, and you can even relieve bee stings with salt, and mosquito bites, and poison ivy. And salt also was used as a punishment in the Middle Ages. if somebody was found guilty of a crime, one form of punishment was to salt their fields. It would kind of poison the soil. It was used as a punishment. So salt has other uses too that aren't as good. When I was a child, I was a horrible person, and I would do horrible things with salt and snails. And well, I'm not going to say any more about that because Butch knows exactly what I'm talking about. But salt has a variety of uses. And there's my snail slide. Okay, see, he's afraid of the salt. Yeah. I used to have strawberry plants, and I would have a hard time with snails, and so I used salt for that. But salt is important. And you know how food fads come and go, how the science of healthy food changes the more we learn. I can remember when I was a kid, the fat-free craze, the sugar-free craze, and now we have the whole food movement, which makes a lot of sense. But anyway, when I was growing up, it was the anti-salt craze. There were all these salt substitutes, and whoever was in charge of making us think what we think made it seem like that if you put salt on anything, you would like instantly explode or something like that. I mean, salt was horrible when I was a kid, and so my mom was a very good, responsible cook who didn't want her family to instantly get sick from all the salt, so she didn't put salt on anything, like ever. We just never used salt, and so that's how I grew up. I grew up not having salt in anything, and like ever. And then I had absolutely no idea how awesome salt is, and now I use salt in my cooking all the time, and I'm like, man, I missed out. I mean, see, that's going to sound weird now when I'm watching. Mom, I loved your food. She's a great cook. I'm going down the wrong hill now. Nope, he's just shaking his head. He's like, I'm not going to back you up on this one. My mom was a fantastic cook, and she fed us very well. She just didn't believe in salt, okay? And then when I was older, I discovered salt, and salt is wonderful. Salt is good. The more I cook, the more I notice how salt is an ingredient in almost everything. Everything. Even sweet things. I think I did a children's sermon a long time ago about salt and pancakes. And it seems odd to me that salt goes in everything. And it's kind of the opposite of what I normally expect. But I learned that salt makes sweet food taste sweeter because it reduces the bitterness. And the key is that it only requires just a little bit, just a pinch. Just a little bit of salt can reduce the bitterness. I make this homemade granola that is really, really good, if I do say so myself. And you need a little bit of salt in it because it just reduces that bitterness and it lets the sweetness kind of come through. Some of you guys that are cooks know this way better than me, but it's just a little bit of salt, and that's all it needs. And salt reduces the bitterness, makes the food taste sweeter, and to me, that's the point that Jesus was making, that we can reduce the bitterness, that as followers of Him, as disciples of Him, we have a role to reduce the bitterness in the world, bitterness with each other. I mean, we see so much bitterness in this world today, so much bitterness with each other today. And He's saying that our role is to be the salt, to reduce that bitterness. We are the salt of the earth. And He uses that metaphor again in Mark chapter 9, verse 50. He says, salt is good, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can you season it? Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another. So it only takes a little salt to reduce the bitterness. And that's actually one of my favorite verses for the youth. Because we live in a big world. We live in a big world and there's lots of bitterness in it. And this verse teaches me, and it teaches the kids, that it only takes a little bit of salt to drive that bitterness out. And so even though sometimes kids might feel little or unimportant or small, it's important for them to know that they can make a difference. Just like salt. The kids can make a big difference in this world and drive out that bitterness. But of course, to me, it isn't really just for kids either. We all feel helpless. We all feel unimportant at times. Or we all feel overwhelmed by the bitterness that surrounds us. And Jesus is telling us not to be deterred, not to be discouraged, not to be daunted. He's saying that we can make a difference, and that we must make a difference. He doesn't say, be like salt. He says, you are salt. You are the salt of the earth. He's saying that you matter. And that's an important thing to remember. But it's an easy thing to overlook. So whatever meaning Jesus had in mind, in all cases though, in all cases, salt is not a useful element by itself. We don't eat plain salt, and its value comes when it's used with other things. To be useful, salt has to be added to other things. Salt must come in contact with the meat to preserve it. It has to be added to the granola recipe to reduce the bitterness and enhance the sweetness. It has to be applied to the road to make the ice melt. So, likewise, the followers of Jesus are called to exist for others and with others. To be effective, we must be involved with others. Salt isn't useful in isolation, and neither are we. When he says, you are the salt of the earth, it isn't just for us. It isn't just for our own holiness, but it's to touch the lives of everyone around us. Last Sunday I mentioned how the Beatitudes all lead up to us being a child of God, and that it's a great inheritance with great responsibility. And I think that this passage continues right along with that message. As salt and as light, we have a responsibility to make this world a better place and to stand up for injustice. And in the same way, light works in the same way. Light functions in order to allow us to see. Light is useful and light is effective when it is in conjunction with something else. Light by itself is not as useful as light applied to other things, like a dark room, or a windy road at night, or a deep, dark cave, or even a backyard. Light is more effective when it is applied to something else. In Jesus' meaning, in the way Jesus used this, light is not simply to allow others to see whatever they wish, but it's useful when it allows others to witness the acts of Jesus, the acts of justice that his followers perform. That's when light is useful. And beyond that, it allows others to recognize that these actions of love, these actions of standing up for injustice, they come from God. Like the Holy Spirit that we were talking about with the kids. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. If you are a follower of Jesus and you're living through your faith journey, you matter. You have an important role to play because you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. In a sense, you can bring that distinctive flavor of God's values to all of life. You can make life palatable. You can make life sweeter. You can bring light where there is darkness. And when you are that light, you are a symbol of God. You are a symbol of His presence in this world. And Jesus has shown us that to be the light over and over again. He's shown us how. With His ministry, with His actions. If we want to know how to be the light, we simply look to Jesus. What did He do? How did He act? If you are the light of the world, people will look to you as an example of what God desires. What you do, how you live, that is a sign of God's faithfulness to others. And don't misunderstand me either. I'm not saying that we need to be the light so we will get some reward. That's not what Jesus is saying. He mentioned that, I mentioned that in the passage earlier. God has given us His grace. And even if we haven't earned it, God has given us His grace. And that's mentioned numerous times in the Bible. We've talked about it in many different sermons. But that doesn't mean that we don't need good works. And that's exactly what Jesus is talking about when He says that you are the light of the world. We share our light through our good works. People see God's love through our good works. And we don't receive God's grace as a reward. Jesus says we start with it. It's the first thing we have. But we have to use it. There are so many songs and so many hymns about light. A couple of years ago we did a VBS where the theme was caves. And the whole point of that VBS was that we are the light. And that we need to spread that light to others. I remember a song in the VBS. It's called Learning to Be the Light. And I think the lyrics fit absolutely perfectly here. It said, when a heart is as cold as ice, you can't melt it with advice. No one wants to listen to a list of things they shouldn't do. So I built a city on a hill, and I lit a candle on the sill. It's so much brighter living in your world. Savior, what you did to me, what you did for me. You gave me something I want everyone to see. I'm learning to be the light. To me, that completely sums it up. I also like to look at other songs. It's one of the things I really like to do. I like to look at songs or art that isn't necessarily Christian in nature. And I look for those themes, and I look for those ideas that are Christian. And I'm really into this band called American Aquarium lately. They have this song called World on Fire. And I think the lyrics of the song fit this sermon perfectly. And again, it's not a Christian song, but to me I think that shows how the message of Jesus carries through no matter what. The whole song is perfect, but the chorus says, the load is heavy and the road is long, and we've only begun to fight. We just can't give in. We just can't give up. We must boldly go into the darkness and be the light. I love it when I can see the Word of God shining through in all sorts of different places. That encourages me. That gives me hope. It gives me reassurance. I love that line. We must boldly go into the darkness and be the light. is exactly what Jesus is talking about. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes others might look down on us. But we must boldly go into the darkness and be the light. When we see injustice, when we see things that are wrong, we must boldly go into the darkness and be the light. Live as light. You are proof. You are proof of God's presence. We need to let people see it. That's who God's followers are, and that's who God's followers are called to do. That's what we are called to do. So theologians spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, as I did today, trying to figure out exactly the meaning and the of Jesus' images of salt and light. But more important is the context of those images for Jesus. Who are the salt of the earth? They're the humble. They are the ones who mourn. They are the meek. They are those who thirst after doing what is right in this world. Who are the light? They are the merciful. They are the pure in heart, the peacemakers, and those who are not afraid to stand up for what's right. We have to stand up for others. We have to speak up when there is injustice. We have to make our light seen. But whatever your view is of the metaphors that Jesus uses here, the core teaching of the Sermon on the Mount remains the same. God expects us to step up. Good works count. Good works are a good thing. And there is a difference between knowing God's word and doing God's word. But meanwhile, we already have God's grace. We are the light of the world. We are the citizens of that town on the hill. We are the light of the world. We are the salt of the earth. And how we use that salt, how we use that light, that part is up to us. As we join in singing our closing hymn, if you feel a desire to respond to the call of God, answer his invitation, feel free to come to the altar and share, to seek the support of others, and make that commitment in your pew. Now let us all join and sing, "Make Me a Blessing." go out, let's remember that we are the light of the world.